Hi, good night, everyone. Good night, good night. We are live finally. My apologies for keeping you all waiting. So, tonight we are on Facebook via StreamYard. And, usually for those who follow us every week, we are usually on Instagram. But tonight we are on Facebook and we are talking to Lara Quentrall-Thomas. So, guys, we are continuing our series of discussions with amazing Virago women. And for those who don't know, let me just quickly recap. Virago is a compilation of stories from women, their personal accounts, their personal stories of overcoming challenges, of learning lessons. And it is a book that is being compiled by Michelle Borrell, who came up with the idea together with Penelope Spencer and Nikki Crosby. And it is really meant to inspire and empower women. And so tonight we are continuing our discussion with Lara Quentrall-Thomas. Good night, Lara. How are you?
Hey, Laura, I am doing great. How are you?
I am good. Good to see you. It's been a while.
I know. I mean, it's on Facebook. Hello, how are you? Clicking likes, and that's about it.
Yes, yes, yes. So, Lara, we are talking networking tonight, the power
Yes.
of networking. So, your chapter in the book is about networking, and you give us your personal experiences as well as tips and advice for people on how to network and the purpose of networking and the benefits of network. So let us start from the beginning. And for those who don't know, Lara is the founder and owner of Regency Recruitment Agency,
Yep.
and she's an HR expert. She's been doing this for how long, Lara? Over 20 years?
Yeah, 30 years, 25 Regency's 25 years old this year. Yeah.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. And you started this company when you were pretty young.
Yeah, I was only, well, if the company's 25 and I started it when I was 26, people can figure out how old I am. But
Yes.
yeah, I
We'll let
was
them do the math.
26.
We'll let them do the math.
I was 26 years old when I started it.
Wow. And when you started, did you know about networking? You knew that was something that existed, as something that you needed to do as an entrepreneur?
Well, honestly, I'd have to say no. I mean, my father was an entrepreneur and he was also, they say that goat don't make sheep or the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And, my father was president of this chamber and he was in Rotary. And I mean, sort of, so maybe on a subconscious level, I was aware of the fact that one had to sort of be moving and grooving to make connections and build a business, but it was
Yes.
never conscious. When I started the company, I started it in a room in my dad's building on Picton Street. He rented me, it wasn't free, I had to pay rent.
Wow.
He rented me a room, and basically, I got a phone book and a phone, and I called companies. I went through the yellow pages and called what looked like big companies, the banks, the insurance companies, and so on, and asked if I could send an introductory letter, if I could go and meet them and present. I mean, I'd always been in sales, so I was selling, cold calling. That was never a problem for me. I have no fear of rejection, quite
Right.
accustomed to it. So that was fine. But the actual concept of networking really didn't come into play for, I would say, probably a good year or two into me trying that route. And
Right.
in the UK, when you're doing sales, people are accustomed to cold calling. It's part of life. You get calls during your dinner, somebody trying to sell you something over the phone. It's very much a
Yes.
part of our life. In Trinidad, it wasn't the case. So it kind of both worked for and against me, because on the one hand, people were quite surprised that somebody was calling them out of the blue to sell them something. Not everybody loved it, but a lot of people were surprised enough to say, okay. And I think having an English accent helped
Yes.
open the doors. People like Trini's like foreign. So that did not do me a disservice. But the networking is really so powerful here. And I sort of learnt by error, by making mistakes, watching other people. And yeah, and really the chapter in the book speaks about the different networks that I have belonged to, I continue to belong to, and how I built my business. But I think for me, the starting point was Pelican.
Ah,
And,
definitely.
some of us older Trinis will remember so fondly the Pelican.
See. So I was thinking about that while you were speaking, and while I was reading your book. In Trinidad, we have networking is we have like to me, two categories of networking. There's the formal and the informal. And our Lyman culture provides that networking space. So people you would have gone to school with, or people who you see you in a space, the same space with them all the time. That is a form of networking as well. I don't know if people really understand. Like I always tell people, deals are not made in boardrooms, they're made in
Right. But, but it's so
life.
interesting. Yeah, no, you're correct. And I mean, Pelican was one of those great melting pots. It was everything. I always tell people everything from politicians to prostitutes,
Yes,
and
yes,
everybody in between was there. But you can't just go and drink. Yeah, you can just go and drink, but obviously you're
yes.
supposed to. What I was doing was I would always go with my business cards, and the more rum I drank, the more confident I became, and I would be giving out my card to different people and saying, because remember, my business is a little different as well, because not only was I looking for customers to hire people, I was looking for job seekers
Right.
to build my candidate database. So, and everybody knows somebody who's looking for a job. Their child has just come back from college, their next door neighbor's gardener's girlfriend, is looking for work. So that side of the equation was not hard to let people know, look, if you know somebody who's looking for a job, here's my card, let them send me their resume and so on. And so the customer side was a little bit more about relationships. It was more about using that network at Pelican to get introductions to decision makers. Because remember, for us in Trinidad, like probably most of the English speaking Caribbean, the Commonwealth, a lot of those decisions are made in places where men congregate
Yes,
and network and
yes,
not women. So
yes,
yes, we line with our alumni, and yes, we have lovely, it's like the Naprima girls. I went to Naps Girls and they have an alumni, and I
yes,
keep telling them, stop having tea parties, have a leadership conference with Michelle Obama. Do you know what I mean?
yes,
Why do we have to have another Easter bonnet
yes,
contest? So whereas the boy networks, the QRCs and the Fatima and what have you, those boys network their alumni,
yes,
and
yes.
girls don't do it. It's changing. I know Bishop's girls are probably masters at that,
Oh
but
yes, oh
a
yes.
lot of girls' schools alumni don't network in that way to use it to support each other to grow businesses,
I
whereas the
think
men have done that.
it's probably seen as a very masculine trait because you have to navigate those rooms. You have to be aggressive. You
Well,
have to be
you
bold.
do, but also remember, traditionally women didn't own businesses. So
Yes,
traditionally women were either homemakers, or in this country you either worked in the bank or for the airline. So women didn't. I mean, there were always exceptions, but now in the last 20 years, more and more women are running their own businesses. Of
yes,
course, with the advent of the internet, you could run your business from home. So the fact that we are more now likely to be entrepreneurs means that we have to be in those spaces where decisions are made. Whereas before, women were not CEOs as much as men were. We were not entrepreneurs. So perhaps maybe we didn't need the access, but now we
yes.
definitely do.
So when you started, what was the reception when you started? You had fellows and you giving out your card and you decided to join groups. What was the reception to you? You're a young girl.
Yeah. Well, yeah, young, white, foreign. Yeah, there was a mixture. I mean, I often tell people that, as I said earlier, I know my accent worked in my favor, and I still listen to the BBC every day to keep it fresh. So I milk it unapologetically. I'm English. I've lived here for most of my life, but this is the accent that I have. I do think being white had its advantages. It did open
Mhm.
doors that I recognize. I recognize white privilege and I acknowledge it. And I mean, I wasn't perhaps as conscious of it back then as I am now, but
Yeah.
certainly recognize that that did work in my favor. And also, a lot of people knew my dad. So people knew the name. They didn't know me, but they knew my father's name. So that also helped, open a few doors. But my age worked against me.
And your
I
gender?
and my gender, although again, a lot of HR professionals are women.
Right.
So, and that was my target audience, really. Those were the sort of clients I was going after. So it wasn't as difficult to get women to discuss business with me because they were accustomed. The recruitment industry really, at its heart, is secretarial and admin recruiting.
Yes. Yes.
Our in Trinidad, I mean, it's grown now, but that's sort of where we all started. So again, it's a lot of women putting other women into jobs. So it was a kind of a closed women, not women only, but very much women centric. But I had people say, I had the CEO of a bank tell me that they did not do business with little girls.
Oh,
Yep.
wow.
And refused to give me any business. And to this day, I won't, they've asked me and I won't recruit for them. I'm waiting for him
Wow.
to die and then I shall go back and
He's still there.
he's still
He's
alive.
still
Yeah, I
there.
think he might have retired by now, but he's still alive. But so there were, and I, of course, I experienced some sexual harassment on a couple of occasions going to meet with customers or potential customers. But by and large, my gender wasn't as much of an. It was really the fact that I was only 26, and people thought, well, she can't possibly know what she's talking about or have any experience. But
Yeah.
then, again, the flip side was that what I was selling was quite low risk because
Okay.
you could take a temp for an hour, and if you didn't like her, call me up and say, look, Laura's not filing as fast as we'd like, send
Yeah.
somebody else.
Yeah.
So it's not like I'm asking you to spend $100 million with me. It was a fairly low risk sort of investment. And my service was very fast because I'd worked in London. I was very efficient. I wanted to prove myself. So yeah, it was not I still had to pound the pavements. I still had to do the work. You have to back it up with service. Being having a well-known name and being foreign is not enough. That might get you in the
Yeah.
door, but you've still got to do the work.
Now, Lara, you've become somewhat of a serial networker.
Yes. That
You
sounds terrible, but yes, I have.
But no, it's a good thing. It's a good thing because here we are. All of your experiences coming, helping others now, right? Really, the foundation to help others. So you will belong to several organizations. You sit on several boards. At what point for you did it become less about helping your business and you developed another purpose? Did you ever develop another purpose when you started? Joining all these organizations, you helped form AFET, you've been in Rotary, you sat on so many state boards. At what point did it become less about networking for your business and more about something else? And what was that something else?
So all of the boards I have been on, including the ones I'm on today, are still about Regency.
Right.
I always make new connections. I always meet new people. For example, in January of this year, I joined the National Training Agency Board and have met some trade union leaders that I wouldn't normally have, I'm aware of, but not necessarily have been in the same room as. And that's been, massively helpful for me in my job. But, underneath that, so that Regency is always very, on my mind. Can Regency benefit from this? Always, whether it's an NGO, a business association, excuse me, a chamber, whatever. But then I also believe in giving back, and Trinidad has been extraordinarily generous to me. And so I feel now I've reached a place in my business where it runs very well without me. I have a great team who've been with me for a long time and know what they're doing. So I can take a bit of time to give back. So the boards that I'm on, I would say probably about 75% of them now are purely to give back, whether it's in terms of in an advisory capacity for, legislation, in the case of the NTA, the whole youth apprenticeship training. I sit on the YBTT board to help
Right.
guide young entrepreneurs. So, giving back is very important. I grew up with that. Both my parents were philanthropists. My sister is, so I'm still in Rotary. I'm very involved in Rotary still, 20 something years later. Um, so I believe in giving back, and I believe if you have the time, space, treasure to do it, you should if you can. So, but Regency still benefits from even from those networks.
Yeah.
I still
Understood.
get business through Rotary, 20 something years later.
So, what is your advice now, guys? Let me just take a minute to just acknowledge some of our listeners. Nikki, hi Nikki, hi Penelope, hi Sasha, hi Sarah. Um, what advice you would give to those who want to network, they want to join an organization, but they're not sure how to go about it, not sure if they qualify. And I'll give you a little story, a little anecdote. I remember when I joined AFET at first, you actually interviewed me. And
Okay.
I joined because I wanted to meet other women, other, ambitious, upwardly mobile, powerful women. But I remember at the time I didn't consider myself a professional, even though I was, but
Yeah.
I didn't consider myself professional. I was so intimidated. I'm like, why am I here? But
Oh no.
it was such a good experience and I learned so much. So for those who may think about joining an organization, becoming part of something, but they don't know how, or they don't think that they belong, they don't think, well, I might be an entrepreneur, but maybe I don't have enough qualifications. All these women seem to be so, you know, fast forward moving, how do you, what advice would you give to start the process?
Okay, so if you're not naturally very confident or self-assured, and of course that doesn't really have anything to do with the amount of experience you have. Some people are like that after 30 years, of business.
Yes.
I would suggest you start with an NGO, because volunteering for an NGO tends to be less pressure. It's not formal networking, it's more doing service projects, community projects, and so on. But it helps you build that confidence in talking to other people, promoting yourself, telling other people a little bit about you, who you are, etc. In fact, I always tell people to join 3 networks: an NGO, your own vocation. So,
Mm,
the Media Association, Hermat. There's an association for everything in Trinidad. And if it doesn't exist, you start it. I
right.
just formed the Trinidad and Tobago Organization of Recruitment Service Providers just before COVID with a couple of colleagues. For
Wow.
20 years, people are saying, oh, why don't we have an association for recruitment service providers? Well, you know what?
There's
Fine.
one
So
now.
I started it, yeah, and we're done. We registered everything. So your own professional association. And then thirdly is a more general business association like an AFET, a TT Chamber. And you start small. Start by going to a few events. I always remember one of the best pieces of advice I ever got when I started networking was set yourself a goal at every event you go to. And even if it's just to meet one new person, that's all. You don't
Right.
have to talk to the CEO of, Guardian Group or Arthur Lockjack. You don't have to talk to those people. Talk to the lady sitting next to you or the man sitting at your table. Introduce yourself. Talk a little bit. Find out what you may have in common, and let that be enough. And then you go back the next time and you meet 2 people. So you have to build your confidence. And the other side of it is you have to get involved. And I say this in the book. You cannot just sit at the back of the room and wonder why nobody's giving you any business, right? You have to join a committee, get on the board, become the president. That's how people see, and that's a journey. It's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah.
I'm very loud and bossy, and I insist on being president after the first week. So my style is a little different, but and of course, and 9 times out of 10, they're so desperate for somebody to be president, they quite happily accept. There's always a
Right.
shortage of people who want to serve in those roles. But get involved, get on a committee, and push yourself to do things outside your comfort zone. So in my case, I'm an HR professional. I do recruitment. So very often when I will volunteer to do things like project management or design or marketing,
Mm,
just because I don't know that and I'd like to learn
yes.
it because it's good for my business.
Yes.
So you put yourself on a committee doing something. I do a lot of fundraising. So I'm learning new skills that will help me in my business. And then, as I say, gradually, as you get more confident, people get to know you. They'll call you and say, hey, we're doing this project. Come and be on the committee, or I want you to lead this. And before you know it, they're begging you to be on their team. And before you know it, you're president of the thing. So,
And I guess it's not so much the title, but also showing people what you can do, showing people your skills, and
yeah,
they will remember
absolutely.
those things, that this person is, pretty efficient in this particular area. So maybe we can call upon her
Yeah.
if we need help or whatever.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really good point, Laura, is that, you have to show up. You have to be reliable. You can't join an association and then never go to any meetings or, not pay your dues and people have to chase you. You're a grown up. If you make a
Yes.
commitment, stick with it. If you can't, because life happens, you get pregnant, you get a new job, you relocate, whatever, then just say, I'm really sorry, folks, I need to resign and move aside. It's so frustrating for those of us that do work, and the 80-20 Pareto principle, right? to
Yes.
have to have grown-ups on a committee. We thought it was bad in school when 2 people carried the whole
Hmm.
team. It's exactly the same when you're grown up, and it's frustrating. So I think you have to be, think about what your brand is. What do you want to be known for as a professional in a particular network? Reliable, responsible, creative, innovative, whatever it is. and that should then be the brand that, how people remember you. So yeah, I
Yes.
agree with that.
I think that is one of the things that probably turn people off from joining organizations, because there's always that handful of people who do everything
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
drive the
that's
thing
true.
forward.
But you can be one of those people.
Yes.
And I mean, I'll just give you a very quick example. In my Rotary Club, we have about 40 members. And yes, there are maybe 10 of us that do most of the work. I mean, without question. But a couple of years ago, we had a new member join, and she has literally embedded herself in our group. When I say it's not really a group, sounds like it, but there's a few of us that know what we're doing and we get it done. She's
Yes.
embedded herself. She's put herself forward. She's now up to be president next year, and she's barely been in the club 2 years. And
Wow.
we all think she's amazing and marvelous. And what's also interesting about a lot of these networking experiences, that most people I know who are good are in many networks. So, they're not afraid of doing multiple things. And a great example is my dear friend Cavell Joseph, who just became president of Hermat.
Oh,
She's
okay.
on, I know, she's on the NTA board with me. And I reached out to her because I have given HR advice to the shelter for abused animals, the TTSPCA, for a
Right.
number of years. And they asked if I knew of anybody else who might like to come on board. So I said to her, anybody on her mat that you think might be willing to help the TTSPCA pro bono with some HR advice? And she said, I'll do it. I mean,
Wow.
she never says no, never. And that she's somebody who does the work. And I admire her so much for that. And that's her brand, that's her reputation. If she says
I,
she's going to do it, she'll do it.
I think that's brilliant, because I think for some people, I've heard people downplay the concept of networking, because I think in their minds, networking is you go into a little cocktail soiree and you stand there with your whiskey in your
Yeah.
hand and you try to make some small talk. But it's so much more than that. And in the book, you break down the benefits of networking. Can you share some of them?
Sure. Well, there's, as I mentioned, skills development. I think that the experiences that you have, whether it's through an NGO or a business chamber, leading a committee, whatever, you learn new skills and you learn new things about yourself. So you develop new skills outside of what may be your core competency as an entrepreneur, as a professional. Um, of course, you make great friends. Some of my best friends, and you would know this, Laura, from AFET, the women that I go on holiday with, that I consider my closest friend on this island, are AFET members, and
Yes.
they are women who came through AFET, I met through AFET, and now are my sisters. So the friends and the family that you create and you build because you've done the work together.
Yes.
You've been in the trenches together. You've I don't know, painted a habitat house, or you've raised money at a barbecue, sweating over a barbecue pit, or whatever, right? You've done the work, and that bonds you in a way that is really meaningful. So you get those long-term relationships. It does provide you with access to other networks. So because you do one, and in many cases they are term limits. So I
Right.
was very privileged to be asked to serve on the first board of the Office of Procurement Regulation. Now, for me, that was an amazing opportunity to be part of that. What should have been a revolution is more of an evolution, but we'll get there in the end. But that came because I had served on the AmCham board, and
Uh,
AmCham not was asked for nominees, and I was asked, and I said yes. And so one opportunity leads to another, right? So you finish one term, and then when the OPR finished, the NTA came in, and I've been asked to serve on a couple of other boards. So it really is, it's that sort of journey, and then you can start to be a bit more selective, and you can start to say, okay, well, now I, not that I'm turning down things really, but I let them know a little bit more cautiously what I can give,
right.
because now I'm doing so many, um, that sometimes I have to be careful. I do have a tendency to say yes and then sort of figure out what the hell I'm doing afterwards. And I have to sometimes stop and say, okay, is this a good strategic move for me in terms of my career, where I want to go? And there is a particular path that I'd like to think that I'm on.
Yes.
So I would say those three things. I don't know if that's what I wrote in the chapter. I haven't read it for a while, but um, certainly the skills development, friendships and relationships, and even mentors and people that, you can go to for advice of things outside that you might need for your business. And then thirdly, one opportunity leading to another, and getting a little bit better and a little higher if you want. And then I think being part of the decision making, whether it's a board, a national board, is so important. If you care about this country, you can't just complain on Facebook.
Yes.
You have to be part of the decision making. Get on a board that could pass legislation or influence cabinet or whatever it is, and then you're part of the solution.
That is true. And the funny thing is, I think, I don't know about other people, but for me, I never really considered being on a board, like a state board or a state agency, as networking.
Yeah.
I just think, oh, you're on a board. But you're right, it is networking.
Yeah, and a lot of people are very um not against, they're very apprehensive because of the integrity and public life declarations that you have to do, and
Mhm.
it is a bit of a pain, I'll be honest. But if you have nothing to hide, then you have nothing to hide, so you should be okay. But I do know some people who'd be great on boards, state boards, but they're just not interested because of the IPLA. But you're right, the networking is amazing. I mean, the OPR board, I knew a couple of people already on there, but 90% of the board I'd never met before.
Hmm.
And you always think, I thought I knew everybody in Trinidad. I must know. And then lo and behold, there's a whole new table of people I've never met before, and senior procurement, finance. And, a couple of them have become really close friends. I even met the district governor of Lyons, who was
Wow.
district governor the same year I was district governor in Rotary. And she and I have become close friends. And I'd never even heard of her before. So these
Wow.
boards really do, yeah, they're absolutely brilliant in terms of sometimes it's just reaffirming old friends, seeing old friends again, but very often it's making new ones as well. And then learning from them, working with them on committees, hearing a completely different and new point of view on a topic.
Yes.
And, that's been really fascinating, particularly things like the COVID vaccination. I have a particular view. I'm on a committee with people who have a completely different point of view. And it's important for me to be open to that. And I'm learning. So, yeah, you really do. You're never too old to learn new things.
Yes. Um, how do you, for people who want to get, because you talk about being in their boards that you have to, their networking organizations and boards that you have to be invited to. For people who have those ambitions, they may see, they have a particular board in mind. Yes, I want to be on this board. How do you put yourself in a position to be invited? Does it come down to the same things you were talking about, but just doing the work, being seen?
Yeah. Well, in my case, that's how I got those opportunities, was through other boards and people knowing who I am and what work I can do and doing the work. There is always the political route, of course, where one is appointed to boards regardless of talent and completely because of political loyalty. And that's a reality in this country. It's perhaps an easier route, but it is a real one. But I think for the most part, and again, if there are sometimes opportunities to put yourself forward. I always remember an International Women's Day event when Kamala Prasad-Bissessar was Prime Minister, and she had all these women, different groups of women in the president's residence, and she was lamenting the lack of women on boards at the time. And I remember standing up or saying at some point, but Honourable Prime Minister, I've sent you my resume 6 times, because I had.
Wow.
The minute she
Wow.
became Prime Minister, I wrote her I mean, it's not to do with politics. I
Yeah.
was I was thrilled to have a female Prime Minister, quite frankly, but I wanted a state board position, and I'm not being shy about my ambition. I want to be part of that decision making. So I wrote to her and I sent her my CV, never heard back. I think 3 or 4 months later, I wrote again. Every time she went out and
Yeah.
said, "Oh, where are all the women?" I'd go, "Here I am. I'm available." And sadly, it never came to anything under that particular administration. Well, actually, no, I lie. Dr. Tiwari, I was appointed to the Economic Development Board when Dr. Tiwari was
Okay.
Minister of Planning. So it did work in the end. But
Are you seeing
sometimes,
enough? Are you seeing enough women now on boards, Lara?
no, it's changing. Now, if you're talking about voluntary boards like state boards, then I think
Mhm.
there's a fairly good balance.
Okay.
If you're talking about private sector boards, then no. I think there's still, insurance companies, banks, some of these big conglomerates, still not enough women on boards. Certainly not a decent representation of their consumers and their shareholders, stakeholders. But I think on the state side, we've not done terribly compared to other
Right.
countries. There are a few female chairmen, not enough, in my opinion. But the boards I've been on, so the OPR board, for example, it was a board of, I think we were 11. We had 4 women.
Hmm.
So it's never quite enough. Sometimes it does feel a bit tokenism. But remember, a lot of these boards are actually guided by legislation.
Yes.
So the board will be prescribed by law. Not that that means you can't find a woman, but sometimes because of the specificity of the skill, there may not be a woman at senior enough level yet for that role.
Right.
Um, but some boards have been very diverse, others not so much. So I would say I would give us probably about a 5 out of 10 as a country for
Okay.
females on boards. Yeah.
So we need to start encouraging more women, younger women, to start getting involved. Take your advice. Start at the NGO level as like an entry
Yeah.
level, opportunity, and
But
work your way up. Get
yeah, but
involved.
also, Laura, a lot of these boards don't make it easy. For example, if you're a young parent, like
Mm.
the OPR board, we would go sometimes till late in the night because we were building it from, we had to bring our own tea bags. Some of these boards meet at night, some it's an all day meeting. So if you're not an
Yes.
entrepreneur or retired or have big grown up children, it's very hard for women a lot of the time. Not that they don't have the talent or want to do it,
Yeah.
but they're not often designed to accommodate picking up from school, childcare. And I mean, you would know, you're a parent, that
Yeah.
those things have to be a priority. So it does make it difficult. And I think boards have to start recognizing that if they want young people, young parents, young women, they have to be flexible about when they meet. I think the online thing has really helped.
Yes. Yes.
Huge, huge help for a lot of mothers and working parents. But typically, a board meeting will go till 8, 9 at night. And if you have kids, that's not an option,
No, it's not. That is an
you know?
excellent point, Lara. I don't think that is anything. I don't think that is an issue that we consider
Yeah.
when we talk about these things. And before we wrap up, Lara, when Michelle approached you to contribute to this book, what made you say yes, and what made you decide to share this particular story?
Um, well, Michelle is very persuasive. She has this lovely sort of, rainbows and unicorns style, but underneath it, she's a pretty serious businesswoman, and she gets you to do what she wants you to do. No, she's very persuasive. I loved the idea of the collaboration between lots of different women on lots of different topics. So that really appealed to me, that it wasn't just one book about one thing. It was really this sort of dynamic, different stories. And then the other thing is, and we discussed this early on, is that the proceeds would go to support women who are victims of domestic violence. So
Yes.
I loved that part of it, and I was happy to contribute that as as a suggestion. And I've really always wanted to write a book, actually. So I liked the idea of, trying my hand, seeing if I could. And I don't know how successful it will be. I guess the sales will tell. But I had a lovely experience doing it. The other women in the group have been amazing. It's a really supportive network, and it's so diverse. It's really a fascinating group of women, and I'm very privileged to be part of it.
Yes, I think Michelle created her own little network.
Yep, she certainly did. She
Yes.
certainly did. Yeah.
And for all of the women who buy this book, read this book, you become part of this network of amazing Virago women going out there, just shattering ceilings and accomplishing your dreams and your goals, and helping to empower those who are watching your journey, and hope and hearing your story. So, Lara, thank you very much. It was a
My
pleasure.
pleasure. Lovely to see you again, Laura. Thank you
Lovely
so
to see you
much.
too. And I know you have a birthday coming up. So
I do.
happy birthday in advance.
Scorpios.
Yes, Scorpio season, baby.
That's right. Can't
So,
wait.
right? So thank you guys for tuning in once more. We are here every Tuesday speaking to amazing women. This was a very informative and very educational conversation. So we'll see you guys again next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.